Walk down the street in almost any major city on Earth and you'll see the same thing. Cranes on the skyline, construction sites behind chain-link fences, towers going up on every corner. And yet somehow housing keeps getting harder to find and harder to afford. Not in one city, not in one country, everywhere at once. The construction is real. The scarcity is also real. The question isn't why housing gets expensive. It's why the squeeze follows the same shape, generation after generation, even when everyone can see it coming. Why does the pattern never change? A housing squeeze looks different depending on where you are. In some cities, it's workers sleeping in their cars because rents have outpaced wages. In others, it's adult children sharing a bedroom into their 30s, or essential workers commuting hours each way on a daily commute because they can't afford to live near where they work. The visible form of the crisis changes. The underlying structure doesn't. But whatever form it takes, the pattern is identical. Supply tightens just when demand peaks. Prices climb faster than incomes. The people who most need affordable housing are the last to get it. And then, eventually, the cycle resets, only to repeat. This isn't a new problem. Consider the pattern across the post-war decades. After a major disruption, a war, a recession, a demographic surge, demand for housing climbs sharply. Construction responds, but it's always late. New units arrive at the top of the demand curve, not the bottom. A glut forms, prices fall, builders pull back. Then a new wave of demand arrives and the whole sequence plays out again. The specific trigger changes each time. The shape of the cycle doesn't. This has repeated across different economic systems, different government structures, and different continents. What makes the current squeeze feel different is that many of the usual buffers, surplus land near city centers, low construction costs, accommodating credit, are harder to find than they have been in recent memory. So why does the pattern keep repeating? The answer is that housing is a coordination problem. Consider every actor in the system. A homebuilder looks at today's prices and makes a decision about whether to break ground. But the unit they build today won't be ready for years, by which point prices may have moved in an entirely different direction. A local planning committee weighs the needs of future residents against the concerns of current ones, and current residents vote. A homeowner watches their property value rise and sees no reason to advocate for more supply nearby. A bank tightens lending just as buyers need access most. Each of these decisions is individually rational. Together, they produce an outcome no one would choose. A market that consistently allocates housing to people who already have it and withholds it from the people who need it most. What makes the modern cycle more severe than earlier ones isn't that the mechanism has changed. It's that several new pressures have entered the system simultaneously. And in the locations where people actually want to live, close to jobs, services, transit, has become genuinely scarce in ways that weren't true a generation ago. Construction costs have climbed faster than general inflation, driven by labor shortages in skilled trades and by more complex building requirements. And platforms that convert long-term rentals into short-term ones have quietly removed units from the permanent housing supply without appearing in any official vacancy statistic. The usual mechanisms that once softened the end of a cycle have weakened or disappeared. The squeeze sits on the same foundation as before. The walls are thicker now. The obvious response is, build more. However, this produces its own complications. Cities that have loosened zoning aggressively sometimes encounter a different problem. Construction booms that overshoot, leaving half-finished towers when credit tightens, and neighborhoods that lurch from scarcity to oversupply without ever stabilizing in between. The cities that have maintained affordability most consistently over time have generally done so through long-term public ownership of land and housing stock, owning the ground so that private market cycles can't drive the outcome. But that model requires sustained political will across decades, something most governments have struggled to maintain. There is no version of fixing housing that doesn't require someone to bear a cost. The question is always who. Imagine a mid-sized city that decides to solve its housing crisis. The mayor announces a major rezoning. Developers respond and break ground. For years, nothing visible happens. Permits are filed, environmental reviews run, financing is arranged. Meanwhile, demand continues to grow, prices continue to rise. By the time the first new units come to market, they are priced at the top of what the market will bear, because that is what the financing structure requires. The people who needed relief when the announcement was made are no longer in the city. They were priced out during the construction lag. The new units absorb a different cohort of residents, and the cycle is ready to begin again with new players. So the practical takeaway is this: housing crises don't appear suddenly. They are built slowly through a series of rational decisions made by actors who are each responding correctly to the system as they find it. If you want to understand where the next squeeze is forming, don't watch prices. Prices are the lag indicator. Watch permit applications. Watch vacancy rates in the surrounding region. Watch whether local governments are making decisions for current residents or future ones. The squeeze is always visible before it's felt. The pattern hasn't changed because the underlying structure, who votes, who builds, who lends, who profits from scarcity, hasn't changed. Back to the city with cranes on the skyline. Those towers are the answer to a question that was asked years ago. The question being asked right now in permit offices, in planning chambers, in lending decisions, will determine what the next cycle looks like. Housing is one of the few markets where the decisions made today won't be felt for years. And because the consequences arrive so much later than the decisions, accountability almost never lands on the people who made the calls. That gap between decision and consequence is where every squeeze is born. The cranes aren't evidence of a solution. They are the evidence of a question that was asked too late.